is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, Umigasa, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Tholahunva with Indian Country Today. This is our newscast covering all things related to the coronavirus pandemic. And overnight, we had good news that came into our newsroom. The governor of the Pueblo of Powaki, Governor Joseph Talachi, has opened up the Hilton Santa Fe Buffalo Thunder Resort to tribal members who have tested positive for the coronavirus. And this gives them a safe place to stay and recover from the virus during this pandemic. So that came also as a result of the large spike in cases among the Pueblo people in New Mexico. So they are getting referrals from the New Mexico Department of Health and also the New Mexico Emergency Operations Center. Overnight, we reported that the Standing Rock Sioux tribe had its first case of the coronavirus, and they were able to identify that person through contact tracing, which is when they look at the person who has been tested positive, and then they go back and they trace their contact with any person in the community or wherever they had that contact with that person, and then they can identify a potential person who may end up getting the coronavirus. Also from the Fort Peck Reservation, Chairman Floyd Azure, he issued a harsh warning and also imposed a fine. If anyone is caught spreading false information, rumors about the coronavirus, about the tribal people, they will incur a $500 fine and possibly jail time. So those are some of the things that Indian Country is doing to face the coronavirus and also to get the word out about not spreading false information, but trying to be respectful and not also putting the people who are tested positive in fear for retaliation for whatever reason. So for the latest numbers, let's bring in Jourdan Bennett-Begaye. She's our Washington editor. Jourdan, thank you so much for joining us here. Good morning.
Hi, Patty. Morning, Yate.
So what's the latest numbers across Indian Country?
Yeah, so as of last night, we have a total of 723 COVID-19 cases across the Indian health system and a total of 31 deaths. On the Navajo Nation, they had an additional 3 deaths that they reported last night. And what's also unique too, we counted a case that was from one Native person who is living in Washington, D.C. in the nation's capital. And what's unique about this person is that the District of Columbia is reporting like the ethnicity of data, and oftentimes a lot of health facilities aren't doing that right now, but we're still counting them in our database.
And tell our viewers how we get these numbers. They're coming from both Indian Health Services and other government entities.
Yes, primarily we're getting them from tribes themselves, tribes and tribally run facilities, because our database is unique, as in, the whole Indian health system is made up of the Indian Health Service and also tribally run health facilities. And we're trying to get the accurate data because IHS can only access data from the direct service health facilities and not the tribally run health facilities. IHS does encourage these tribally run health facilities to report this data, but a lot of times tribes aren't doing that because of, it's because of sovereignty right there. And so we're actively, looking at social media, we're calling people. We have a Google form on our syllabus that individuals can report cases within their tribes that they can fill out. They can also email the Washington editor or myself at washingtoneditor@indiancountrytoday.com. But we're actively looking and reaching out to people to report these cases to us.
And again, all of that information can be found on our platform.
Correct, yes. So people can go to our Indian Country Today's syllabus, and when you're on your phone, you just swipe 3 times to the left on your phone, you'll find it. It has data, it has a map of all the cases within the Indian health system. It has our stories, all of our coverage, our opinions. And we encourage people to send us their op-eds if they're interested. And also with that, like obituaries too, there are a lot of deaths, and we are really trying to put a face to this pandemic and to show, that people are being affected by this in profound ways. And because a lot of the times the people who die from this, they're dying alone. Their family members can't be by them to love them and to hold their hand and to say, that it's okay, just to comfort them in this really hard time.
Yeah, it's so true. We've seen a lot of stories overall across the country about people who when that person leaves their home, if they're taken away in an ambulance or something, when they get to that point, they know that that's most likely going to be the last time they see their family member. It's hard. It's really hard to report this and to see what's happening, but this is our reality. All right. Well, Jourdan Bennett-Begaye, thank you so much for joining us and giving us an update on the coverage with Indian Country today. We've got a whole newsroom of people working all from home and doing a really great job. So we really appreciate everybody on our team and working here today. Thank you, Jourdan.
Yes, thank you, Patty.
We would like to say thank you to Shelly Diaz for joining us today. Shelly is the Hub Coordinator for the Minnesota Tribal Coalition for 2020 Census. Shelly, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We also have back with us Jourdan Bennett-Begaye, our Washington editor, and she's been covering Census 2020 for a number of months now. Jourdan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we would start the conversation, Shelly. The census started here, this year in 2020, but when did you actually start working on the census?
I started working on the census. We've been planning it for like 3-4 years now. 2016, I was first approached by a tribal partnership specialist in my duties at Mille Band. I'm a Mille Band member and I work for our chief executive. And she appointed me as the contact person, the tribal liaison for our census efforts at Mille. I then got involved with some partnership, Minnesota Census Mobilization Partnership in Minnesota. And that is a bunch of organizations that got together to work in the historically undercounted communities, making sure everybody gets counted in the census. And so by default, I guess, I was named the coordinator for the tribal hub. There's 5 hubs in Minnesota, with one being the tribal hub.
So it's been several years since you have started this effort to get tribes to participate. And looking back at the 2010 census, how much was just the state of Minnesota, the tribes in Minnesota, how much were they undercounted by?
In the 2010 census, they were undercounted by at least almost 5%, which is, hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal funding. Most hurting the children. Children are the most historically undercounted population. And if you undercount children, that's practically their whole educational lifespan. And so they're underfunded during their school years, which is very critical.
Programs like Head Start,
school lunches, even just schools, federal funding, special ed, anything like that. Even Indian education. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so funding these programs are critically important in Indian country, as well as in our, for our urban Native population. So,
absolutely.
Yes. So let me ask Jourdan about just this idea of trusting. There's a whole history of trust. What have you found in your reporting, Jourdan, about working with tribes to get the people willing to trust the federal government, which is a few?
Yeah. A lot of Native people, if they have somebody knocking on their door asking for information, personal information, and they don't look like them or they don't recognize them, they're most likely not going to give out that information that's needed for the census, right? And so that's another household that's going to be undercounted. It contributes to federal funding and also political representation. But it's I always tell people, if you had your cousin who was working for the census, or just imagine at least your cousin asks you for $20. You know them, you see them, you're gonna give them $20. But it's just kind of the same thing. If some stranger came up to your door and asked for $20, you're gonna be like, who are you? Are you gonna give them? Why are you asking for money from me? So it's really important for the census, for Native people to work for the census, because when you see people who working for the census come to your door, you're more likely to have that trust with them. You're more likely to listen to them, what they have to say. But also you have people who are working for the census who know these communities, who know which Native households are there. people have influence on the data, people who have influence on hiring, and people who have like a huge network behind them too. So, they know the big influencers in Indian country, in their own tribes, in their own communities, and in their own state. So it has a huge influence in trusting, people Native people who work for the census.
Is that what you're finding, Shelly, is really trying to recruit Native people to be those census workers?
Absolutely. One good thing that's become of the 2020 census is we have complete count committees in each of the 11 tribes. And in the urban area, there's the Metro Urban Indian Complete Count Committee. And so there's all these organizations, and each of the tribes have their own complete count committee. Also, we've gotten we've gotten funding and support through the nonprofits in Minnesota to help support our efforts in Indian country to make sure that we get everybody counted.
Wow. And so right now, there is a map that is on the census.gov website, and it's already showing us how many people have turned in their census forms, and whether it's mail-in, whether it's online or by phone. And your state actually ranks #1.
Ooh. Yeah, pretty proud of that. But yeah, the self-response map is up there. Some of the tribes, you can go in there on 2020, my2020census.gov, and you can go into that map and you can click on tribal areas. You can click on states, counties, cities to see where you rank. You can rank. I think Fond du Lac Indian Reservation is leading the efforts at 47% self-response rate. And this is even before the postcards and the paper forms have been mailed out. They started mailing the paper forms out this Monday, and they go till next week. So everybody that hasn't self-responded yet will get a paper form in the mail. And I think the biggest challenge that we do have is the reservation lands that have selected the leave update or leave enumerate response method, which means census takers come to the house. And with this COVID-19 pandemic, there's that social distancing and stay at home mandates that are taking place now. So the US Census Bureau efforts have been delayed and postponed at least 2 weeks. So, we were all built up to start our tribal census on March 21st. And that's when we got that stay at home and everything got canceled. We got our Lieutenant Governor, as you know, Peggy Flanagan, and our awesome Governor Walz to declare that March 21st was going to be this 2020 Census Powwow Day. We were going to have spontaneous powwows all over the state. We got, swag ordered, t-shirts ordered, feasts lined up, and all that got, switched now. We have to figure out how are we going to do this without being social. And, we are social, community-based people, and so this new virtual world we're living in has got us, thinking differently now and trying to figure out new ways that make sure, because it's so critical that we get our people counted. I mean, we've been undercounted all the time. We've been unheard and everything. And now with everything that's going on with, the political environment, the elections, everything, that we have to get our Native people counted. So.
Yes, and we already talked about how it impacts healthcare, but also things like our education, it impacts things like roads too, and so infrastructure.
Yes. And also with this pandemic, there's the disaster relief funds that go out. Guess what they're basing that money on is the 2010 census numbers. So, we need to make sure that we're counted and we are amongst the recipients of these appropriated federal funds that, they are obligated for treaty, their treaty obligations. They have to hold those.
Absolutely. And when it goes back to numbers, I saw a statistic, and it said that one person, this is, I guess, average, represents $2,800 a year. So over the course of 10 years, which is the time between a census count, that's going to be adding up to $28,000 per person. So when you those terms, maybe that kind of resonates a little bit more for people. Of course, that money won't go to the person; it will go to the tribe. With the tribe, now you have an option to mark your ethnicity, your race on the census form. What are you telling your people when it comes to if somebody has more than one tribe?
We're trying to encourage people, although we can't tell people what to indicate or what to put on their census forms. Everybody self-identifies. But as far as federal appropriations go, I've heard through different sources that, our funders, they are looking at the American Indian alone population and not in combination or two or more races. The more races you put down, you get put in the two or more races. So you're not counted among the American Indians. In all of my time trying to speak with different groups, U.S. Census Bureau and Leadership Academy, I just try to figure out, how are you not counting people twice? If I'm half white, I'm half Native, which bucket do you put me in? And which bucket do our funders take from? So we are encouraging one tribe, one race.
All right. Jourdan, what are you finding in your reporting along those lines?
I was just going to say, I think the census is saying that you can put multiple tribes in there, but it's all about after the fact. Like, what is that? How is that data going to be broken up, like later, like after this is done? Are we going to be able to, go in and like see, this person's part of this tribe and this tribe, or how many? And it also just like the comparison too of, the census and tribal enrollment. I think that's another story or angle that we have to look at too. Which one is, which one weighs more than the other at this point. But I mean, I think like people should know that they can put like all their tribes on these paper forms and online. I know the census is saying, like, even though there seems to be not enough room on the paper form, that you can go in and scribble, like put it in the margins or around it, and they'll still count that the tribes that you're a part of.
And what's in a name? When you go to fill out your census form, and say you're Apache, is just putting down Apache enough? If you are Choctaw, is just putting down Choctaw enough? Or if you're Cherokee? Because we know that Apaches, there are several different tribes, different bands, and the same with Choctaws and also Cherokees. So what is the census saying when it comes to collecting that name and that data?
So what I've heard is that, back in 2016, I believe there were tribal consultations asking tribal leaders what do they prefer their tribal name as being. And how many different ways do tribal members identify themselves? So they have some program that's some computer program that will take all the different ways that they could possibly fill out their form. Like, we have Mille Band, we have different districts. Like, we have Chiminising, we have Ojibwe, so that we capture all of those different ways people identify, and they will make sure that they fall into that category. But I would just want to emphasize that nobody determines membership of a tribe but the tribe itself, because we are all sovereign nations.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard the same thing too, that the census form is going to take what the people call themselves. Like, I'm Navajo, so we call ourselves Dene, and that's going to be taken on the census form, and also Navajo, the name that was given to us, and that's same with like all other tribal nations too.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, the National Congress of American Indians also has a census campaign, and that is Indian Country Counts. Are you working with them, Shelly, to help spread the word across your country, across your state, but also, across Indian country at large?
Oh yeah, yes, we have regular phone conferences nationwide. There's a whole coalition of tribes from all over. Actually, that's where I met Jourdan, was at the NCAI. They had a meeting and got us all together from different regions to talk about ways that, you know, we're getting the word out. How are we going to be getting the count? Of course, that was before the pandemic, you know. So now they switched to the road show, which is all virtual road shows now. And so now, yeah, we're shifting our focus on the online stuff. But one good thing is 2020 census. This is the first time a census has been available online. Call it a coincidence, I don't know, but you know, it's a good thing that it is. I mean, we'd be really behind the ball a lot more if, you know, if this wasn't available online. So I encourage people to please get on my2020census.gov, fill that out, and be sure, you know, for our Native communities that the person number one should be Native American in that household, even if it's mixed race, whatever, because then that household will be counted as a Native American household.
And I guess I have a question for you, Shelly. Like this pandemic does provide like a lot of obstacles for communities because a lot of tribal nations are closing their borders and not letting outsiders in. And you know, a lot of times like these tribal partnerships, you know, live outside their communities and they're supposed to go into these tribal nations, but their borders are closed. How has, I guess, Minnesota been dealing with that barrier or obstacle in trying to get people to complete the census?
Yeah, 10 of the 11 tribes do not have borders per se. We have reservation boundaries, but Red Lake is the only nation that I know that has borders, and they have a closed border right now. And I guess, you know, people come and go, whatever. Our governor is like, and even all the tribes have put executive order to stay at home. And so I'm trying to, and all of us liaisons are trying to encourage our tribal leaders to keep that message out there. Hey, you're at home. What's a better time to get online and fill out that census form? And, you know, so.
Well, go ahead, Jourdan.
Oh, it's like, I mean, since we're on the topic of borders, when I went on the map for the census to look at, see if there is like a total like self-response rate for tribal nations, I just noticed that it was by tribal area, if they were indicated, and oftentimes, I guess there's a report that came out in Idaho that the Shoshone Bannock tribe was the highest #1 ranking tribe in Idaho. But when I looked at the map, it didn't seem like it. It said it was Nez Perce. And so I don't know if you're familiar with like how that's reported, or if there's like a system for tribes to go see how they are doing in their response rate.
Right. You know, I just was on a webinar yesterday with the U.S. Census about deciphering the tribal data on census, and they go by counties, but they also go by tribal areas. So there may be non-natives alongside that are included in a tribal area because there's non-natives that live in the tribal area. But then when you go down to a tribal track, which is a little bit dig deeper in, you can request that information from them. So yeah.
Yeah, see, and that's interesting because I was looking for Cherokee, and they, you know, they weren't listed on that tribal area, but also a lot of tribes don't have any land bases. So how can tribes like keep track of their own self-response rate? I don't know if you know that, or if that's something you're told.
That's something that still I'm not very familiar with at this point. I know they did just get moved to a new platform of putting their information out there. They went from the way that you can get into their data. It's a little different now. And so, yeah, I'm still kind of
that
around.
Yeah, I think that's, again, looking at broadband access, that can be a challenge. There's a phone number you can call, and you can answer the census form on a telephone call, which a lot of people can do in rural, remote areas. So we'll get that phone number. Do you happen to know it off the top of your head, Shelly?
I do.
How about
the phone number, although, you know, that is an option, although I've heard that people have had hour-long waits, they're kind of backed up. I don't know. The number is 844-330-2020. And they're available from 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. So there's only a little 3-hour break that they take. So we're trying to encourage people online if they can. One of our efforts that we're going to do going forward, like right now it's April. The census efforts will end mid to end of August. So, we have a pretty good stretch of time available. Hopefully, this is gonna, the pandemic is gonna die down. We're gonna be able to, get mobile again and get some people out there with some tablets.
You have some time left. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Shelly Diaz, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being here today.
I just wanted to say one thing. The 2020 census is officially running on Indian time.
Thank you very much.
You're
Join us
welcome.
again tomorrow. Thank you, Jourdan Bennett-Begaye, for joining us. I'm Patty Thalahungva. Join us tomorrow.
This is Indian Country Today.